Good morning, and welcome to our first community meeting for the Linganore-Oakdale-Urbana Redistricting Study. My name is Beth Passerb, and I'm the Supervisor of Facilities Planning for Frederick County Public Schools. As you may know, Frederick County Public Schools recently completed construction of the new Sugarloaf Elementary School on Stone Barn Drive in the Urbana community. The Urbana Elementary School students and faculty have moved into that building for this school year and will be there next school year as well, while their school is demolished and reconstructed on their site. When the new Urbana Elementary School was completed in 2020, the Urbana Elementary School students and faculty will move back to their building and will open Sugarloaf Elementary School. At the same time, we've been designing a new school in the Hamptons West neighborhood of Lake Linganore on Gas House Pike. This school will open in 2021. This redistricting study will establish attendance boundaries for both of these new schools. And the study has also the potential to adjust any attendance boundary within the study area while we seek to balance enrollments and also identify feeder schools for these two new schools. The superintendent's recommendations for the new attendance boundaries will be presented to the Board of Education in September, and following workshops and a public hearing, we expect that the board will make decisions in November. The implementation of the redistricted attendance boundaries will begin with the 2020 school year and will likely be phased over several years. The Board of Education approved the scope of work and the study area for this project, and we've hired consultants Cropper GIS to help us with this project. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Matthew Cropper, President of Cropper GIS, who will outline the study area, scope of work, study schedule, and information that's been collected so far in support of this study.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you all for being here. And thank you also for the live audience who is watching this on social media. It's very exciting to use all these vehicles and avenues for public engagement, and we're very excited to have people watching this as well online. A little bit about who we are. We are Cropper GIS Consulting. We're based out of Ohio, and we work with districts all over the country. Our specialty is just this kind of work. We do redistricting studies all over the United States. We also do demographic studies and population enrollment forecasting, and we help schools figure out where to close schools or where to open schools. And so we work a lot with districts through the planning components of this as well. But as I said, we work with districts of all sizes, everywhere from 2,000 to 200,000 students. Done a lot of work on the eastern seaboard here in the United States. In addition to public schools, we also work with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights, and we help provide them consultation regarding federal desegregation lawsuits. And so what we bring to the table is expertise in what has and what hasn't worked across the United States as it relates to school redistricting. And we also bring technology. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. It's a mapping tool that helps us to accurately map out students so we can count students on any street, in any neighborhood, within any attendance area, and be able to understand what the impact would be of moving an area one way or the other. As I said, I'm Matthew Cropper. I'm going to be facilitating this process with Frederick County Public Schools. I have about 20 years of experience in doing this, and I'm very honored to be working with the district on this endeavor. As Beth mentioned, a little bit of an overview on why we're here. What is the need? What's driving the need to look at boundaries and do some redistricting? So the Frederick County Public Schools is opening two new elementary schools. Sugarloaf Elementary on Stone Barn Drive down in Urbana. That school is actually temporarily housing Urbana Elementary students while Urbana Elementary is being replaced, constructed on the site. That Urbana Elementary is planned to be ready for the 2021 year, and when that happens, the Sugarloaf Elementary will have its own zone with its own population and communities feeding that school. In addition to that, there's a not yet named elementary school in Lake Linganore, Hamptons West neighborhood, located off Gas House Pike Road. And that is scheduled to open for the 2021-22 school year. In addition to establishing attendance boundaries for these new schools, other elementary schools in the area will also be evaluated. So as we're populating the zones for these schools and helping to make them efficiently utilized, we're also going to be looking at other schools in the area to make sure that we can also study their utilization and see if we can balance utilization among schools and provide relief to as many schools in this area as possible, while also minimizing the impact on students. So in addition to elementary schools, we're also going to be looking at middle and high schools as part of this study. And the real focus of that is to look at utilization and trying to balance utilization if necessary, but also look at the impact on feeder patterns. As we make adjustments to elementary schools, that line may actually necessitate a change in a middle school or high school line so that you can have efficient feeder patterns as a school goes from elementary to middle, a community goes from elementary to middle, and from middle to high, trying to make sure that that's as efficient as possible. So these are the following schools listed that are in the study area, and I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. So the elementary schools that are expected, that could be impacted as part of this study, include Centerville, Deer Crossing, Green Valley, Kemptown, Liberty, New Market, Oakdale, Twin Ridge, Urbana, and Spring Ridge. And Spring Ridge is actually, the Spring Ridge zone is divided by the Monocacy River. And for the purpose of this study, we are only looking at the area of Spring Ridge that's east of the Monocacy River. So area west of the Monocacy is not anticipated to be impacted as a result of the study. The only potential area for Spring Ridge is east of that river. For middle schools, the middle schools area that encompass the same region is New Market Middle, Oakdale Middle, Urbana Middle, Windsor Knolls, and Governor Thomas Johnson. And again, Governor Thomas Johnson is only east of the Monocacy River, just like Spring Ridge. And then the high schools that are going to be studied that could be impacted as part of this are Linganore, Oakdale, and Urbana high schools. So I've provided a couple of maps in the PowerPoint, just some static maps to kind of give you a visual of the list of schools that could be impacted. So we have elementary and middle schools shown on this particular map, and you could see it's pretty much the eastern side of Frederick County Public Schools. It's the easternmost section of the county, going down south, and sort of the eastern area of the county is the area that we are studying as part of this, this process. So these are elementaries and middles. And then there's a high school map too to show you how the high schools are laid out. And when you look at these maps, the background color shows you the current zones. And then we've also provided some other overlays on the map so that you could kind of get an idea of how other boundaries relate when you're looking at high school. For example, you could look at the green outlines represent the middle school zones boundaries, and then the elementary outlines are shown in blue on this. And that can be seen on any of these maps that we have. We give you the other boundaries just for reference point. So our project objectives for this study are to explore and develop elementary, middle, and high school options through a community-based process. We really value the public's input and the public's participation in this process, and we encourage the public to participate. And really the most successful redistricting studies enable the public to participate, provide feedback that we study and monitor. Most importantly, we will be focusing on developing options that best adhere to the FCPS Policy 200.2, which are redistricting criteria. So the district has established policy and guidelines for the district to follow when they do start evaluating attendance boundaries. And I'll go over those here in a minute. So we, as a consultant, were hired to develop supporting materials to help facilitate this study, to help facilitate the process of working with the public and giving some guidance on how the public can be engaged throughout the study, and then also to leverage our expertise as consultants with technology and also our depth of experience in doing this work across the United States. So talking a little bit about Policy 200.2, I want to orient you as a public on this because these are the factors that we will be studying when we determine if a line should move one way or the other. We always ask ourselves, does making this adjustment bring us closer to adhering to the criteria, or is it taking us further away from the criteria? And so always evaluating the criteria and looking at those, any adjustment line to see how it better adheres to the criteria if possible. So these are educational welfare of students, frequency of redistricting, with every attempt being made to limit individual student redistricting to not more than once every 5 years. So there hasn't been a lot of extensive redistricting in this area, but we will be mindful of that. If there has been any recent redistricting, we'll be mindful of which areas were moved recently. Proximity to schools in order to maximize walkers and minimize distance or time of bus runs. So proximity to the school will be studied, looking at and talking with transportation, and also studying the map and seeing how, envisioning how students may be transported to school along major roads and things like that. So that'll be constantly explored and studied as we evaluate options. Student demographics, so we'll be looking at not only the number of students that live inside an area or that are anticipated to attend an area, but we'll also be looking at demographic information of the students to understand what the impact on demographics may be of any boundary change. Student academic performance, and that's not something that we measure per se. We don't look at test score information when we do this, but we will be looking at a lot of information and statistics and data to support and ensure that schools are equitable in terms of academic performance. Operating and capital costs, so if we create efficient zones as efficient as possible, the operating and capital costs as a result of these boundaries will be as efficient as possible. Establish feeder patterns. So I talked about feeder patterns. So as we look at elementaries, we'll also be looking at the impact on middle and high schools to understand what the impact may be on feeder patterns. And try to avoid feeder pattern splits if possible, but there may be some times when a school may be split from elementary to middle or middle to high, but just know that we will be studying that and trying to keep that as minimal as possible. Impact on neighborhoods and communities, so calculating the number of kids and students that would be impacted as a result of any move. The impact on specialized programs or a change to school capacity, so we have capacity numbers that we're using for planning purposes, and those do factor in programs and other things that are being offered at the building so that we don't compromise any program that's at a school by making boundary adjustments to it. Instructional and operational capacity of involved schools, so that goes back to the capacity that we're using, has that built into it, so that we are making sure that we're working with the good functional capacity of the buildings and not overloading a school as a result of this. And any other factor that is unique or pertinent to the proposed redistricting. So that could be some things that are best practices, such as using major roads and things like that to draw the lines along, or maybe input and things like that from the public that we may not be aware of that are unique to Frederick County. And so those kind of factors and all of these factors will be studied and examined as we start to evaluate attendance boundary options and redistricting options. It's important to note that it may not be possible to incorporate each factor into all adjustments. And so while we consider this and look at it, it's, in our experience, no plan is ever going to be perfect. There's always going to be parts of a plan that you wish you could make better, but there's only so many things that you can do because of the density of different communities in different areas of the county, how many seats that a school has, the distance from communities to schools, and different things that limit what we can do with redistricting, but we will be looking at developing plans and drafts for you that best adhere to these criteria as best as possible, knowing that they may not perfectly adhere to all criteria. So breaking down the approach to this project, we've broken it down into 4 phases. We've collected the information, and we're going to continue collecting information through the course of the study. Take this information, analyze it, put it into mapping formats or whatever formats we can so that we can study it and accurately understand so the data can inform us. We've created a background report, which is just basically a report that has background data and information as a starting point, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then the 4th part of this process is just analyzing the data, creating options, and then listening to the public as we're doing that, and engaging the public as well through a series of meetings. We've collected data from the school district. They've provided database information which we have mapped out, current and planned capacities and where schools are going to be located and things like that, and the timelines, projected enrollment, and other information, the demographic information such as the free and reduced meal information and any other information to support the study. The district has been very helpful, and I'm sure that we'll continue the flow of information as we see fit or needed. The city and county provided us a lot of information as it relates to property lines. We know where each property line is and how each property is shaped in the county, major roads and rivers and other features that can be pertinent or applicable to this study, subdivisions, where future developments are going and how many housing units are being planned. A lot of that information is being provided by the city and the county sources. So we've taken all this information, the information we have so far, and we put it into our mapping system, the GIS, so that we can accurately overlay students and looking at new subdivisions and current subdivisions and start to study how they relate to each other and the roads and things like that. One of the things I want to talk about are planning blocks. So these are something that we use in a lot of districts. We've been doing it a lot for the past, I'd say 10 years. We've been using planning blocks. And it's a good way to inform the public on, to understand how many students live in a particular area, smaller than an attendance area. So what you'll see when you start to look at maps is a black and white dashed outline. On some of the plot maps and some of the static maps, you'll see that they are black and white dashed outlines. And we have an interactive map too, and those outlines for planning blocks are actually a pink color, and I'll show them to you in a minute. But when you start to look at these planning blocks, you can start to see that we take every elementary attendance area and we break it down into much smaller pieces. Think of these as building blocks for redistricting or pieces of a puzzle to try to help which areas can move together or stay together. We build these with the criteria in mind, trying not to split subdivisions and neighborhoods if at all possible. But there are some communities in this study area that are very densely populated. And you'll see that some of these planning blocks are small, and we've done our best to align planning blocks with communities and to enable us to be able to look at creating options. You'll see on these planning block labels that there's a top label and it has PB and a number. So that's the planning block ID number. So as members of the public, when you start to provide input, you can say, I live in planning block 160. Or whatever the planning block number is. And that helps us as planners hone in and dive in right to the exact area that they're looking at. You'll see also below that planning block ID number is another number, and that number represents the number of students that actually, Frederick County Public School students that live inside that planning block. So for elementary maps, that label will represent elementary students. For middle school, it'll be middle school kids that will be that count, and then the high school maps will show the number of high schoolers that live in each planning block. So this helps us to see, okay, if we move a planning block one way or the other, we can see how many kids are in there, and we can easily say, oh, that'll fit in that school, or that's not going to fit in that school from the first pass just at how many students live in it. And that can also inform you as members of the public to see what options we're considering, and you can maybe even look at providing suggestions. Well, why don't you swap this planning block for this planning block? And that can help give us some thoughts and ideas as well and further inform us as consultants and the staff. So as I said, there's in addition to static maps that we've created, we've also built an online map, and this map can be found on the Frederick County Public Schools Redistricting webpage. But this is an online interactive map that can be used on any device. When I'm in town, I pull up my iPhone and I pull up the site, and you can pinch zoom in on the site and look at the boundaries, and you can turn on and off different layers. There's even a nice feature where you can show your location, and it'll zoom in on your location, and you can turn that off and kind of see where you are as it relates to the boundaries. It really helps inform me on where I am in the study area and which areas that we're looking at. And it can also it's very useful for the public to further understand how the options are laid out. You can turn on and off different options, and it's a very user-friendly site. And this can be found on the Redistricting Study webpage. I've given a couple of screenshots here. so you can see kind of what it looks like. And this is taken from the just from a desktop, but on your phones, if you're using mobile devices, it's in the same format. You'll notice that there is a little a layer list on the left, and if you're looking at it mobile, that layer list is not active, it's not showing. You'll see in the middle of that layer list, right where between the layer list and the map, there is a little arrow. You click on that or push on that on your phone, and it'll expand that layer list. And so you'll see on the layer list, there's different options, different layers you can turn on and off. And so you can maximize expand different options. For instance, the planning blocks, you have to click the top box in the planning blocks because it's a dynamic layer that you can turn on and off different labels or the planning block IDs. You'll see that on the planning block layers, you can turn on and off the K through 5th graders that live inside the zone or the boundary, or the middle schoolers or the high schoolers. So you could interact with that to see how that looks. There is a README. If you look at the far right, there's a help link that pulls up a PDF on how to, basic instructions on how to interact with the map. And as options are created, you'll start to see options going here. Right now, it's just elementary, middle, and high school boundaries. And then as options start to get drafted, and when they're ready for the public, we will post them on here so that you can toggle on and off different options and see how you may be impacted. As you zoom in on the interactive map, it starts to pull up more detail. So when you start off at the district level, it's not much labeling going on and things like that, because if we labeled at that scale, it would be a big mess on the map. But as you zoom in, more information starts to populate. You'll see that this is a screenshot that shows you the planning blocks. There are the pink outlines, and then you could see also property lines, parcels, and then you can also interact with the planning block labels and turn on and off different layers as well. Just a little bit about the background report. So basically, we've put together information that just helps inform the public on some statistics and data that we are studying. This is just a starting point, and as more information is created, we will keep feeding the web page with more data and information that we are studying, with the focus on full transparency and letting the public see everything that we are studying. We have nothing to hide here. And this background report is good because it helps share a consistent and accurate message. So if anybody wants to know what's the capacity of a school, or what does policy 200.2 really say, you don't have to speculate on anything. You can go to this background report, or you can go to the web page and access information, and the data is there. It helps avoid a lot of speculation that can occur as it relates to redistricting and facilities. And this can be downloaded from the web page, the Redistricting Project web page as well. So this is talking a little bit about the fourth phase. Once we've created a lot of information, we're going to start getting into options. We haven't done options yet. We haven't drafted options. I've provided just a couple of samples on the screen here, just so you can kind of get a picture of envision some options that are being drafted. So we like to start the process with some baseline options, and then let the public give us some input as it relates to these options. These are drawn with the policy 200.2 in mind. They will be drawn with that in mind. And we'll be starting options probably next week. We'll start getting into options and start really working on it and in preparation for the public information session in mid-March, where we'll be sharing these with you. As I said, developing these with the criteria in mind, and we do expect these options to be modified. These will be starting points, drafts, and one of the things that's important to note to the public is that every map that's being presented and shared with you, especially as it relates to options, will be drafted through the course of the study. Nothing is finalized until it's approved by the school board. And so any map is drafted as the whole process matures, and we are encouraging the public to give us input as it relates to the options to see if there's something that we've missed. Is there any way that we can modify zones and boundaries to make them better and better adherence to policy 200? As I said, we really encouraged transparency and want the public to be a part of this process. We are excited to have the public be a part of this process, and look forward to working with you as we continue this study. Throughout the entire project, the district will engage school communities in meaningful activities that invite the parents, staff, and community to fully participate in the process. So there is a detailed community engagement plan that can be found on the Redistricting webpage that you can go look at, and you can see what the staff has planned for you to engage you and to really bring you into this process and so that you can participate. In addition to the webpage, the district will be utilizing social and print media, find out first announcements, school newsletters, and other avenues to inform the public and to solicit input. This is just a preview of the timeline. You can see we're at the very beginning of this process, and with the public information sessions this week. February and March, we'll be working through options in preparation to present some scenarios, some draft options to you in March, mid-March. After that public information session occurs, we'll have a survey to get some input from you to really understand some of your input as it relates to the criteria, and then we'll go back and keep working on revising options and looking at making adjustments to options, maybe creating new options through April and May, and then in early June we will be going back to the public again and saying, okay, we've revised some maps, coming back to you and showing you another version of maps and other drafts and getting some more input from you with the same format through a survey. And then June through August we'll continue to finalize options, and then at that point we're starting to prepare recommendations and an implementation plan for this study. The recommendations are expected to be presented to the board in September, and then through September and October, that's when everything, the maps are delivered, the option and recommendation is delivered to the board. It's in their hands, and they have the power at that point to study it. The goal during this phase is to really inform the board on the options so they fully understand what the options are and what's the impact of the boundaries that are being recommended, and working through them through a series of public hearings and workshops. And the board is expected to vote on a plan in November of this year. So how can you participate as members of the public? There are many ways. There's a redistricting study webpage. So if you go to the webpage, that's where you can access a lot of information that I've covered today, and such as the interactive map and some of the materials. There's a Find Out First. You can register for Find Out First using this link that's on the screen, fcps.org/FOF, and that gets you on a list to be notified for things related to the redistricting. There's an email address. It's louredistrict@fcps.org, and this is an email that's designed for this study. If you have questions or comments, you can email to this page and to this email address, and that will be studied by the staff and also shared with me as we monitor and continue the study. There's also other social media avenues for you that we will be looking at. There's a Facebook page designed for this study, as well as a Twitter feed, so that you can also provide input through those methods if you choose to do so. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Passerb, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. So this information will also be presented tonight at the community meeting at Urbana High School Auditorium at 7 p.m. If you come tonight, there will also be an opportunity for questions and comments, and we're also going to have a short activity that will give you an opportunity to let us know which of those 10 factors that Matt went over from Policy 200 are most important to you. If you aren't able to come tonight, but you also want to give that input, we'll be posting a survey on the webpage where you can provide that feedback. And as Matt mentioned, the webpage is www.fcps.org/LOU Any questions and comments, again, can be sent to our email address, louredistrict@fcps.org. Thank you very much.